أصحاب السعادة، الحضور الكريم، أسعد الله صباحكم بكل خير. يسر هيئة الأوراق المالية والسلع أن ترحب بكم في بداية هذه الفعالية التي تتناول موضوع تعزيز الاستثمار الأجنبي في الأسواق المالية، والتي يتم تنظيمها بالتعاون بين هيئة الأوراق المالية والسلع واتحاد هيئات الأوراق المالية العربية، وهي الفعالية التي تحتضن في الوقت نفسه الملتقى السنوي الأول للوسطاء العرب. دور هيئة الأوراق المالية والسلع كجهة تنظيمية في تعزيز البيئة الاستثمارية الجاذبة للاستثمار هو محور كلمة معالي المهندس سلطان بن سعيد المنصوري، التي يلقيها نيابة عنه سعادة دكتور عبيد الزعابي الرئيس التنفيذي للهيئة، فليتفضل مشكورا.
أصحاب السعادة، السيدات والسادة، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله، وأسعد الله صباحكم بكل خير وسعادة. يطيب لي في مستهل أعمال هذا المؤتمر أن أغتنم هذه الفرصة لأرحب بالحضور الكريم، وأن أعبر لكم جميعا عن خالص الشكر وعميق الامتنان على تلبيتكم دعوة هيئة الأوراق المالية والسلع بدولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة لحضور هذا المؤتمر الهام الذي يتناول قضايا كثيرة وعلى جانب كبير من الأهمية فيما يتصل بالتنمية الاقتصادية وتنمية الأسواق المالية في دولنا العربية. كما أرجو أن تسمحوا لي بداية أن أرحب بضيوفنا الكرام من الدول الأخرى الشقيقة في بلدهم الثاني دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة، وأنا أتمنى لهم طيب الإقامة، ونعرب لكم جميعا عن سعادتي الغامرة بانعقاد هذه الفعالية بمشاركة هذه الكوكبة من الخبراء والمتخصصين في أسواق الأوراق المالية ومجتمع الأعمال. ومما لا شك فيه أن هذا المؤتمر يأتي في وقت ملائم توجه فيه الكثير من دول العالم اهتماما لافتا لقطاع الأوراق المالية بما يتواكب مع جهودها الحثيثة الهادفة لإعطاء المزيد من الزخم لاقتصاداتها. كما أن انعقاد هذا المؤتمر يأتي في ضوء تطورات مهمة تشهدها الأسواق الإقليمية والعالمية عموما في المجالات المختلفة التنظيمية والمؤسسية والتكنولوجية، بالتزامن مع جهود تحديث البنى الأساسية لها. فيما يتعلق بدولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة، دعونا نستعرض معا أبرز تطورات أسواق الأوراق المالية بالدولة. فمع نهاية الربع الأول من عام 2018 تم تداول بما يعادل 18 مليار ورقة مالية بلغت قيمتها نحو 8 مليارات دولار، وبلغت القيمة السوقية بنهاية الفترة نحو 242 مليار دولار، وبلغ عدد الشركات المدرجة بأسواق الدولة 136 شركة، تبلغ نسبة القيمة السوقية للناتج المحلي الإجمالي بما يوازي 60%. كما بلغت قيمة التداول للناتج المحلي الإجمالي بما يعادل تقريبا 2% في الربع الأول من عام 2018. كما قامت الهيئة والأسواق باستكمال تطوير برنامج الرقابة على التداول اللي هي سمارت مع شركة ناسداك OMX، وكذلك دشنت الهيئة على المسار تطوير الأسواق المالية مشروع مع أوبن تكست وزيروكس فيما يتعلق بتطوير البنى الأساسية وتطوير الأنشطة الأساسية للهيئة بغرض تطوير نظام جديد للخدمات الأساسية يغطي كافة الخدمات التي تقدمها في قطاعات العمل بالهيئة والإدارات الفنية مثل الرقابة والترخيص والإصدار والتنفيذ. وانطلاقا من حرص هيئة الأوراق المالية والسلع على الالتقاء بكفاءة العاملين في قطاع الأوراق المالية ومواكبة مستجدات الصناعة العالمية والأهداف الاقتصادية المحلية، قامت الهيئة بإجراءات تحديث على متطلبات برنامج اختبار الترخيص المهني، بإضافة اختبارات ووظائف جديدة معتمدة، إلى جانب إجراء بعض التعديلات على مسارات اختبار المهن المعتمدة لدى الهيئة، بتطوير الاتفاقية مع معهد الاستثمار والأوراق المالية بالمملكة المتحدة CISI. وأيضا دشنت الهيئة برنامج التعليم المستمر CBD، والذي يتطلب من كل مرخص عدد ساعات معينة يقضيها كتدريب في السنة. وفي مجال التكنولوجيا المالية ومواكبة التطورات الكبيرة في هذا المجال، أبرمت الهيئة اتفاقا مع شركة عالمية للحصول على خدماتها بغية تطوير إطار تنظيمي للتكنولوجيا المالية فينتك والتنظيمية في أسواق المال بالدولة. كما تواصل الهيئة تنفيذ مراحل مشروع الSROs مع الأسواق المالية في الدولة فيما يتعلق بتطوير المنظومة التشريعية والرقابية. أيضا الهيئة تعمل حاليا بتطوير منظومة رقابية فيما يتعلق بالبيتكوينز والكريبتو كرنسي، وبما يسمى العملات المشفرة أو الافتراضية. وجهت هيئة الأوراق المالية والسلع إلى المستثمرين في الآونة الأخيرة تحذيراً بضرورة التزام أقصى درجات الحذر مع كافة أنشطة جميع الأموال القائمة على الاستثمار في الأصول المشفرة Digital Assets، مثل الكريبتو كرنسي والأدوات الرمزية توكنز وغيرها من الأدوات الافتراضية التي يجري مزاولتها وتداولها بشكل أو بآخر في دولة الإمارات، سواء تمت الإشارة إلى هذه الأنشطة بالإصدارات الأولية Initial Coin Offerings أو الإصدارات الأولية الرمزية Initial Tokens Offerings. وتقوم حاليا بإجراء الدراسات الفنية عن الجهات التي تنظمها والممارسات العالمية وإمكانية تطبيق نظام رقابي تشريعي يناسب دولة الإمارات في هذا المجال. كما أن الهيئة بصدد إطلاق مبادرة هي الأولى من نوعها على مستوى العالم بالتعاون مع منظمة التعاون الاقتصادي والتنمية OECD، تتمثل في منصة لتمويل الشركات الصغيرة والمتوسطة، وفيما يتعلق بالاستدامة وبناء على توجيهات حكومتنا الرشيدة لتوجيه القطاع العام والخاص في تبني مبادرة الاقتصاد الأخضر والمسؤولية البيئية المجتمعية، بادرت هيئة الأوراق المالية والسلع بوضع تصور لإطار عام لتأسيس أسواق رأس المال المستدامة على مستوى الدولة، والذي يهدف إلى توفير منتجات مالية خضراء وتوفير قنوات تمويل مبتكرة للمشاريع المستدامة، وحث الشركات على الإفصاح عن دورها ومسؤوليتها تجاه البيئة والمجتمع وأصحاب المصلحة في الشركات المساهمة، وتوعية المستثمرين ومن يمثلونهم بأهمية دورهم في دعم الاقتصاد المستدام والاستثمار المسؤول في هذا المجال. وفي إطار الجهود الرامية لتحقيق رؤية سيدي صاحب السمو الشيخ محمد بن راشد آل مكتوم نائب رئيس الدولة رئيس مجلس الوزراء حاكم دبي رعاه الله في مجال تطوير منصة استثمارية للاقتصاد الإسلامي، قامت هيئة الأوراق المالية والسلع بإطلاق استراتيجية تطوير سوق رأس المال الإسلامي، الذي تضمن دور الهيئة والسوقين الماليين في تنفيذها. وتهدف هذه الاستراتيجية إلى وضع أسس شاملة من ممكنات قانونية وأنظمة وخطط تشغيلية وتنفيذية وموازنات وخطط تدريب وتوعية لإنشاء سوق رأس مال إسلامي يوفر منتجات وخدمات وآليات سوق تتوافق مع الشريعة الإسلامية، وتوفر مزيجا من العوائد والمخاطر بصورة تعمل على جذب الاستثمارات وتسهم في تطوير قطاع الأوراق المالية وزيادة نمو الناتج المحلي في الاقتصاد الوطني. أيضا قمنا بالتنسيق في هذا المجال مع منظمات دولية مثل الويفي والIFSP والأيوسكو لتضمين المعايير الدولية في الأطر المتوافقة مع الشريعة الإسلامية. وعلى مستوى تصنيف الأسواق على المؤشرات العالمية، تعمل الهيئة بشكل حثيث بالتعاون الوثيق مع الأسواق على استكمال المنظومة التشريعية والفنية والتكنولوجية، أيضا بهدف رفع تصنيف الأسواق إلى أسواق متقدمة وقد جاء اختيار موضوع المؤتمر هذا انطلاقا من أهمية الاستثمار الأجنبي في الأسواق المالية ودوره في رفع معدلات النمو الاقتصادي ونقل وتوطين التكنولوجيا المتقدمة وتعزيز الخبرات الفنية وزيادة معدلات التوظيف وفرص العمل وزيادة عمق الأسواق المالية. وقد حرصت الهيئة على تنظيم مثل هذه المؤتمرات بالتعاون مع منظمات دولية، ومن أهمها اتحاد هيئات الأوراق المالية العربية، لإلقاء المزيد من الضوء على أبعاد هذه المواضيع ولفت أنظار المتابعين والمستثمرين إلى المزايا الهائلة والفرص الاستثمارية المتاحة في الأسواق المالية في دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة، وذلك بمشاركة خبراء ومتخصصين في مختلف دول العالم. أتمنى لكم جميعا الاستفادة القصوى من المواضيع المطروحة على مؤتمرنا هذا، آملا إثراء المناقشات بالمعرفة والخبرة التي يتمتع بها كل الحضور لتكون رافدا ومخزونا معرفيا قابلا للتطبيق، سوف يتم تضمينه في كتيب التوصيات الذي سوف ينشر لاحقا عن أوراق العمل التي يتم طرحها في المؤتمر. وعلى ذلك أتمنى للجميع التوفيق والسداد، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. معالي وزير الاقتصاد في دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة المهندس سلطان بن سعيد المنصوري، ممثلا بسعادة الدكتور عبيد زعابي، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، السيدات والسادة، باسم اتحاد هيئة الأوراق المالية العربية الذي يتشرف لبنان برئاسته لهذه السنة، أتقدم بالشكر من دولة الإمارات العربية الشقيقة على استضافتها لهذا المؤتمر، كما أشكر معالي الوزير المنصوري على رعايته، وأشكر أيضا هيئة الأوراق المالية والسلع على دعوتهم للاتحاد للمشاركة في تنظيم هذا المؤتمر السنوي. وأنوه بالجانب التنظيمي المميز لهذا المؤتمر، وأحيي الإخوة الإماراتيين على اندفاعهم الدائم لتحقيق التعاون العربي في جميع المجالات. يأتي انعقاد هذا المؤتمر في ظل التطورات الدولية المتسارعة التي تشهدها أسواق المال العالمية في مختلف المجالات، فعلى الرغم من التقلبات الحادة في أداء الأسواق والتي تعكس الأوضاع الاقتصادية والسياسية المتقلبة، فقد واصلت هذه الأسواق وعلى المدى الطويل من تحقيق مكاسب هامة في مؤشراتها الرئيسية، كما عززت من مكانتها في مجالات التكنولوجيا والرقابة والتنظيم والحوكمة. ولعل تركيز هذا المؤتمر على إحدى عناصر رئيسية لأسواق رأس المال، أي شركات الوساطة المالية ودورها في تطوير الأسواق وجذب الاستثمارات المحلية والأجنبية، يعكس مدى الاهتمام في تطوير المهن المالية وبناء القدرات الذاتية للعاملين بالأسواق المالية وشركات الخدمات المالية، نظراً لارتباطهم المباشر مع المستثمرين ودورها الحيوي بالتطوير والتعليم والتوعية والابتكار. وبالتأكيد فإن هيئات الرقابة العربية تلعب دوراً مهماً في مجال تمكين شركات الوساطة من القيام بدورهم وفق أفضل المعايير والممارسات الدولية، وضمن إطار رقابي محكم مع التركيز على قضايا التدريب والتأهيل وبناء القدرات الذاتية، واتباع معايير حوكمة مناسبة تضمن تحقيق الاستقرار وحماية السوق من التقلبات والمخاطر النظامية والمخاطر الإلكترونية وغيرها من المخاطر. أيها السادة، لقد أولت الأسواق المالية العربية اهتماماً متزايداً للاستثمار الخارجي أو الأجنبي، نظراً لأهميته في دعم الأسواق المالية وتعزيز عمقها وسيولتها، خاصة وأن تلك الاستثمارات تعكس ثقة المستثمرين الأجانب بالأسواق المالية العربية واقتصاداتها. ومما لا شك فيه بأن الخطوات الأخيرة التي اتخذتها بعض أسواق المال العربية تمثل خطوات إيجابية مهمة في مجال زيادة انفتاح الأسواق المالية العربية على الاستثمارات الأجنبية. ومن المهم الاستمرار في اتخاذ التدابير اللازمة لتسهيل الولوج إلى الأسواق المالية العربية من قبل المستثمرين الأجانب، وتطبيق أفضل المعايير والممارسات الدولية في هذا المجال، مع التأكيد على ضمان حماية المستثمرين وتعزيز استقرار الأسواق وحمايتها من التلاعب. لقد حققت الأسواق المالية الدولية تقدماً واضحاً في مجال التكنولوجيا المالية أو فينتك، وكذلك التشريعات المالية ريكتك، حيث أصبحت هذه التطورات حتمية وتتطلب تضافر جهود مختلف الجهات للاستفادة من هذه الطفرة النوعية بما يخدم أسواق رأس المال العربية. ومن المهم التأكيد على ضرورة استمرار فتح قنوات الاتصال ما بين هيئات الرقابة والجهات الخاضعة لرقابتها وشركات التكنولوجيا المالية بهدف المساعدة في خلق البنية التشريعية والتنظيمية الملائمة لتشجيع الابتكار وتطبيق أفضل الأنظمة والبنية الإلكترونية المناسبة، وبما يحقق زيادة شفافية الأسواق وتسهيل التعامل والتسوية والمقاس، مع تأكيدنا المحافظة على الأهداف الرئيسية وفي طليعتها حماية المستثمرين واستقرار الأسواق وحمايتها من المخاطر، وخاصة تلك المرتبطة بالمخاطر الإلكترونية السايبر كرايمز، والتأكيد على زيادة مقاومة الأسواق لمثل هذه المخاطر. الحضور الكريم، لقد خطأ اتحاد هيئة الأوراق المالية العربية خطوات كبيرة باتجاه تعزيز التعاون والتنسيق المشترك بين هيئات الأوراق المالية العربية. فمنذ تأسيس الاتحاد عام 2007 حققت هيئات الرقابة العربية للدول الأعضاء بالاتحاد والبالغ عددها 15 دولة تقدماً واضحاً بشأن اعتماد قواعد عامة استرشادية مشتركة تغطي معظم الجوانب المرتبطة بأسواق رأس المال العربية، خاصة ما يتعلق منها بالحوكمة والإفصاح والإنفاذ والتعامل الداخلي واعتماد شركات الخدمات المالية وغيرها من المجالات. كما عزز الاتحاد الإطار العام للتعاون المشترك من خلال اتفاقية عامة متعددة الأطراف ما بين الدول الأعضاء بالاتحاد تهدف إلى الوصول إلى أقصى درجات التعاون المشترك وتبادل المعلومات. أما في إطار توعية المستثمرين فقد أولاها الاتحاد اهتماماً خاصاً، إذ أقر لها في الخطة الاستراتيجية محوراً من ضمن المحاور الخمسة نظراً لأهمية تمكين المستثمرين الأفراد من فهم الخيارات المتاحة لهم وتقييمها مما يخفف من احتمال تعرضهم للاحتيال. فالتثقيف المالي يساعد ليس فقط على حماية الأفراد والمستثمرين، بل يساهم أيضاً في تطوير الأسواق المالية من خلال تعزيز ثقة المستثمرين بهذه الأسواق، وهو مكمل لعمل هيئات الرقابة المتعلقة بالتنظيم والإشراف والرقابة. ومن المهم الإشارة هنا إلى مبادرة الاتحاد في هذا المجال، والمتمثلة بإطلاق بوابة إلكترونية خاصة بالتعليم والتوعية، حيث تم من خلال هذه البوابة تجميع المبادرات العربية والمواقع الإلكترونية المتخصصة لتسهيل عملية الوصول إلى المعلومات ووسائل التعليم والتوعية المتاحة، خاصة وأن عدد من هيئات الرقابة العربية قد قطعت شوطاً كبيراً وحققت تطورات نوعية هامة في هذا المجال. وعلى العموم فقد دعمت المنظمة الدولية لهيئات الرقابة أيوسكو وغيرها من المؤسسات الدولية الجهود الرامية لرفع درجة الوعي لدى المستثمر العربي وتمكينه من اتخاذ القرارات الاستثمارية المناسبة. وفي الختام أشكر إصغائكم وأتمنى النجاح للمؤتمر والازدهار والأمان لشعوبنا العربية، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Securities and Commodities Authority and the Union of Arab Securities Authorities, welcome today to the annual conference Promoting Foreign Investment in Financial Markets. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to address such distinguished guests from across the region. I have been asked to open the conference and to present my view as a consultant, as a former practitioner, and as a former regulator, as to the key trends that are developing both globally and regionally, and the impact and opportunities that those trends may have on the regional capital markets. The global political agenda has been dominated in recent years by issues such as the election of new world leaders in the US, the UK, and France, each with their own approach to foreign and trade policy, by Brexit and its effect on the UK and European Union, and by increasing political tensions between East and West. Within the GCC and MENA region, the economic environment of the last 3 years or so has been difficult also. Oil prices have until recently been depressed and have necessitated global coordination on production cuts. The rise and fall of Daesh has strained the very fabric of society in several countries and has impacted on the tourism revenues of others. But there are signs that the region is poised to rebound from these challenges. Oil prices seem to be stabilizing at significantly higher levels than were seen in 2014. The recently announced package of reforms by Crown Prince Sheikh Mohammed bin Salman in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has captured the international imagination, particularly following his recent US visit. Global high-profile events such as the 2020 World Expo in Dubai will focus interest in the region, as will the upcoming IPO of Saudi Aramco, which will see it overtake the likes of Apple, Amazon, and Google as the most valuable corporation in the world. What does this mean for the regional capital markets? Well, firstly, the strain that the falling oil prices had on public finances highlighted the need for governments to introduce more diversification into their funding strategies. And part of that diversification was the need to utilize the capital markets to raise funding through bond issuance on a government and corporate level and in local currency. And indeed, there has been a significant growth in the regional bond market within this period. The development of well-regulated, efficient and liquid capital markets in the region will bring numerous benefits. By diversifying funding sources, capital markets relieve pressures on banks and mitigate systemic risks. A well-functioning bond and sukuk market in the GCC, for instance, would also facilitate the conduct of independent monetary policy if ever the time comes to depeg the currencies from the US dollar or to create a single currency in the GCC. Such a market would also underpin financial stability by providing a ready supply of high-quality liquid assets and helps to strengthen the bank's liquidity buffers. Capital markets are also effective vehicles for citizen participation in economic growth, and they could be a powerful channel for promoting financial inclusion and equitable growth. The growth trend in regional markets looks set to continue, but there are also some challenges which need to be overcome and opportunities that need to be developed before the full potential of these markets can be realized. One is to follow through on the implementation of corporate governance reforms. It is clear that the cost of capital reduces as the market perception of corporate governance standards increase. Similarly, the cost of capital also reduces where governments and corporates are transparent and provide global investors with sufficient information as to the financial situation of the potential investment. The region also needs to be open to the possibility of greater foreign ownership of domestic assets to allow for additional liquidity. It is understood that this remains a central plank of economic strategy in the region, which should be moved forward given the opportunities which are emerging regionally. Indeed, openness to foreign ownership is one of the criteria for inclusion in the MSCI Emerging Markets Index, and a decision on Saudi Arabia's eligibility for inclusion in this index is expected in June of this year, following the addition of UAE in 2016. If more regional authorities bring down the barriers to foreign investment, it increases the chances of that region being added to the MSCI index, which in turn would also allow for trillions of dollars in global institutional funds to invest in the market. I believe that there are many banks, brokers, and practitioners represented here today. The authorities in the region must encourage the growth of intermediaries who are vital to the successful operation of capital markets. These intermediaries facilitate market making, promote a trading culture, and ensure market-sourced liquidity when needed. Illiquid markets are unattractive to both those who are looking to list and those who are looking to invest, and therefore the importance of these intermediaries cannot be overlooked. It is also important that intermediaries are well regulated and supervised to ensure that the markets are not abused, as markets are only attractive to investors if there is appropriate trading infrastructure supported by robust regulatory frameworks, including both pre- and post-trade transparency. Training of these intermediaries must also be a key focus of these firms, and regulators must consider the need for minimum qualifications or the introduction of an industry standard exam, especially as these markets become more complex and the demands of investors become more technical. For markets to develop, we also need to develop our intermediaries. Another rapidly developing area in capital markets is financial technology solutions, or fintech. Fintech as a product can create new value propositions or improve existing ones. It can help build capabilities that can enhance client relationships, reduce costs through automation and simplification, and can facilitate regulatory compliance. Fintech is not new, but the growth of fintech and the application of it is. We're now familiar with suppliers of market data, news distribution, risk management, core processing, electronic brokerage services, and other high-frequency trading platforms. The explosion in interest in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies has taken the traditional world by surprise, all of which has caused the regulators to step back and determine whether the regulatory framework remains appropriate and fit for purpose in this fast-moving world. We are finding that it is regulation itself which is a key driver of the latest fintech explosion, as capital market players move towards low capital-intensive business models that require enhanced technologies. Regulations and the cost of regulation have become a huge burden globally for financial institutions since the global financial crisis. HSBC recently disclosed that it had increased the number of people it employed in its risk and compliance functions globally by 20% in 2016 alone. And that department now represents 10% of its global workforce. This has led to the creation of the regulatory technology sector. So-called RegTech firms have stepped up to help financial services firms navigate the evolving regulatory maze. Currently, there are more than 400 sources of regulatory information, with many regulatory tasks such as KYC, trade surveillance, currently requiring extensive manual efforts by both the internal compliance teams and the regulators. RegTech seeks to reduce manual intervention. Examples include analyzing trends in employee behavior to provide early risk warnings for possible future non-compliance, helping firms proactively deal with any conduct issues that could cause concern before they are a concern. They also provide an auditable trail which can demonstrate to the regulators proper surveillance by the firm, which can also be used by the regulators to monitor markets. The advent of multiple startup firms, though, supplying solutions on an outsourced basis, increases risk. Reducing these risks will be critical for the industry to drive innovation. At the same time, in the light of regulatory capital constraints, the appetite for operational risk has diminished. As such, fintech clients, including the regulator, will need to analyze and mitigate both contractual risks and operational risks, such as reliability and security. As we are aware, while new and increased regulation is inevitable to deal with market infrastructure changes, we have to ensure that there is a balance between innovation and regulation. Otherwise, we will be left behind in these fast-paced developments. And we will need to address this while at the same time ensuring that there is adequate investor protection. The ramifications of getting it wrong can also be equally damaging. One specific area of growth in the fintech space is the use of blockchain solutions, a topic which will be covered by one of the panel sessions today. This technology is particularly important to capital markets and regulators, as it presents an opportunity to fundamentally re-engineer traditional processes. The trend is for blockchain's distributed ledger technology to evolve from experimentation to mainstream adoption across multiple business applications. These processes will have its own set of challenges to overcome, owing to the number of internal and/or external participants, latency challenges, and security concerns. Examples include settlement optimization, client onboarding, standard settlement instructions, collateral management, regulatory audit and reporting, and a host of others. While financial sector innovation is absolutely central to growth, this same innovation is likely to bring greater risks as regulators struggle to keep up with changing technologies, products and services. And it will be important that common ground on key issues like financial data privacy and anti-money laundering are found sooner rather than later. And as the world moves more online, the risk of cybercrime is ever present, and regulators need to ensure that institutions invest appropriately and sufficiently to protect both their and their clients' assets and data. Increasingly, regulatory developments from outside the region are impacting on the policies and procedures of local financial institutions. Following the global implementation of FATCA in 2015 comes the equivalent EU tax evasion legislation, CRS. In both cases, financial institutions have had to modify their operating processes so as to be able to identify, collect, and report data to tax authorities based overseas. It is not an option to not comply, as countries run the risk of being blacklisted from global commercial activities for non-compliance. Money laundering and terrorist financing will remain a prime focus for regulators globally, with regulators all too ready to hand out eye-watering fines to firms that do not take their obligations seriously enough. It is also the case that many countries in the region will be subject to refreshed FATF mutual evaluations in the next few years, with the UAE scheduled for 2019, Oman 2021, and Kuwait in 2022. Today at this conference, the organizers have created an agenda and invited experts in the field to inform and educate on many of the topics I have mentioned, including the role of regulators in the development of capital markets, the impact of fintech on capital markets, attracting foreign investment into the region, post-trade transparency, and building capacity in regional markets. I'm sure that you will find the conference extremely enlightening, and thank you very much.
As you can notice, we have two regulators, we have two exchanges, and we have one from the industry, from the European perspective. So I have a question for the panel. What worried you as a capital market regulator to start with? As a regulator at this stage, with this turbulence in the international markets and the oil prices and the political heat in the overall region. So what is the main worry as a regulator? Is it governance? Is it transparency of the market? Is it liquidity? Is it facing the risk? What is the priority from your perspective, Dr. Abeid?
From my point of view, it's all these factors in our center of attentions. But nowadays, I think if we could put them on a scale of priority, the fourth generation of technology, the revolution of technology, fintech, the cryptocurrency, is the ultimate, factor take the attentions of regulator nowadays. But those classical factor, which is the governance, the disclosure, the retaining back, the investor confidence, still the daily day-to-day work of the regulator, if I could say.
Yeah, I totally agree. But again, a regulator shouldn't worry. A regulator should have a vision. A regulator should understand the dynamics of the market and act accordingly. Yes, cryptocurrency, as much as it is a worry because it is unregulated, because it is loose, we need to start discussing together and individually do our work in terms of how we could, because it's happening. We cannot, today in Lebanon, the central bank has issued circulars forbidding any trade in bitcoins. We know it cannot last. We know that this thing is happening, it's moving. What we need to do is react to this trend and understand how is the best way to minimize any damage on that. Again, investor protection is extremely important. Systemic risk is at the heart of everything that we do. Everything that you've mentioned is very important. Again, it has to be part of an overall image. Liquidity, yes, liquidity is always a problem, especially these days. But regulators have learned a lesson post-2008. Many of the regulators have either reshuffled the whole regulatory system. Some of them have actually added more power to the regulatory authority. And some countries have actually created new regulatory authority to deal with other regulators. Like Europe, you see, like in the US, you see the SSC and the CFTC, they have more power now to regulate more. In terms of the European Union, they actually created another entity to regulate. Regulators are always, it's a process. It's a dynamic process that you have to look at.
Yeah. From the exchange perspective, Dr. Mr. Marhoun, you are the most senior CEO in the region. So what main concern?
I think you brought me on this panel to criticize my friend Dr. Ubaid and
No, not at all.
other regulators. Well, so many things worries us, but let me emphasize as an exchange. Our most worries is about the excessive power of the regulators. That's true. That's true. But I think in spite of all these things, markets are very dynamic. Markets got to adapt. Markets also got to update themselves with the events happening either locally or internationally. And in the environment where everything is moving very fast, and our markets, also got to follow those type of developments to be up to the expectation and to the level in order to attract, investors and to be also reputable, organizations. And that reputation reflects on the image of our countries, of our markets, and also on the investors' image. And also liquidity has been the real issue these years, in spite of the stability of the oil prices recently, but we have not seen that reflected on the liquidities in our market, probably because IBOs also is not, to that, level.
Mr. Naveen, from the industry point of view and the intermediaries, what do you have?
From my intermediary point of view, basically one of the most critical element of any financial market is the market intermediaries, because they are the people who face the end clients. Because the regulator acts as an apex board with the exchange in the market, but it is the brokers and the dealers who are actually getting the clients closer to the market. So as long as they are properly regulated and they are competent enough in that aspect, the confidence for the end client to enter a market gets really difficult. And from our market perspective, there are quite a few steps which has been taken by the regulator, specifically the Article 123, which was introduced, which dwelt on the broad levels about the fit and proper criteria, the financial condition, the competence of each of the market intermediaries, and also the compliance aspect. Yeah. So these increase the confidence for the end client and the investors to invest into a local market, as well as this is very critical from a foreign investment perspective, because that's what anybody wanting to invest in a particular region would like to see. How is the infrastructure developed out there? Yes. If I'm getting my client money into that market, is it enforceable? Is it protected? That's the critical element.
Mr. Joe, from European perspective, as you know, MiFID II is on the top priority now in Europe. And what major concern that you think the region should look at after having MiFID II in the pipeline already in Europe?
Yeah, sure.
Briefly, please.
MiFID II, briefly, I'm not sure if that's actually possible. But I mean, as I said, I think it does potentially set a new benchmark for transparency and investor protection. And obviously, as we know, global financial institutions, where possible, try to implement globally compliance systems as opposed to implementing sort of regional systems. So I do think that's one reason why we're going to see MiFID II influence markets beyond Europe. I do also think that at IOSCO level as well, it's interesting to see recently they released a paper with recommendations about increasing pre- and post-trade transparency in bond markets. So I do think in a way that some elements of MiFID are potentially going global in a sense. And I actually feel that non-EU regulators have the best of both worlds in a sense, because Europe in a sense was the laboratory for some of these reforms, and market participants were the guinea pigs, so to speak, in some respects. Whereas I think now the rest of the world has an opportunity to see in a sense what has worked well and what hasn't worked so well, and what parts of it may be relevant for their own national markets, and which parts of it actually don't have any relevance at all.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And I would like to start with two questions to all of you regarding the themes that are the main topics for our conversation today. And they are quite generic, and if you could actually try to bring them closer to your companies or to the exchanges that you are in touch with, that would be very helpful for our discussion. And what do you believe are the most recent developments within financial technology that could actually mean a rupture to models we are all used to up to this moment? Is blockchain the single answer, and what could be the other answers? And how effectively can blockchain and new infrastructure technology reduce the cost of transactioning in financial system? How commercially, how are those alternatives interesting? And maybe if we could start with Stephen, and then we just bring the conversation forward to our other members.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's an interesting, a very wide question how you phrased it. If I look what of the, as we're talking about blockchain quite a lot, what of these elements of blockchain is the most interesting to me at the moment? We have capital raising, we have trade execution, we have post-trade elements and KYC. Currently, my main interest is actually on the trade execution side. Leave away the capital raising part that comes with the ICOs. On the trade execution side, the last year or so has seen quite an interesting development with Alpha Point, with Gibraltar Stock Exchange, ICO, Hybrid Stock Exchange, or EquiChain, where the technology is actually used to challenge the established markets. This is an element where I think we will have to focus mainly on.
Well, thank you. To Bashar, how can we talk about different topics? For example, artificial intelligence, which is something that IBM is extremely close to right now. How is the interest from your clients in the region, and at what level the conversation is happening at this moment?
Thank you. I think this is a very important question, especially in this country here where we have an artificial intelligence minister. The discussion globally is around data and abundance of data and connectivity. And that's changed the landscape across industries. We're not just talking finance, we're talking really across different industries. We're able now to provide users with an improved and enhanced user experience. And if we club that with business process redefinition around a completely new technology like blockchain, I think we are rewriting the world or rewriting our industries as we speak. And we are at an inflection point where we are going to see how technology is going to add a lot of value in the way we interact with each other. This morning there were two topics that were highlighted. One was FinTech and one was FinReg. And in both, artificial intelligence can play a tremendous role in streamlining the processes, improving the experience. There are numbers and statistics around 30% of tasks can be eliminated using artificial intelligence. 90% of human errors can be removed using artificial intelligence. Imagine the impact this has on tech reg and fintech.
Faisal, I would like to hear from you, considering you're representing a global company that has clients everywhere, and that you have a personal experience outside of the region as well. How do you, at what point do you see the demands here in the Middle East in the same page as what your clients everywhere else have? And what is specifically our clients from here demanding from NASDAQ when it comes to solutions of all kinds depending on their business?
Thank you. So it is important to mention two aspects of NASDAQ in this point. So one is NASDAQ being an operator of exchanges itself, running about 26 exchanges globally. So we see technology and innovation as a key aspect in our roadmap in order to be able to differentiate ourselves and move from the traditional core development of monolithic stacks of technology into more nimble software delivery models. And that coincides with our market technology business, where we commercialize technologies outside of NASDAQ to market infrastructure operators that include exchanges, clearinghouses, depositories, and to a large extent, regulators on the surveillance side. But we see three main disruptors in the financial world. Our number one probably priority would be to move all the technology stack from the on-prem deployment on a local data warehouse onto cloud. So cloud comes first for us. And while deploying on cloud, you have a lot of leverage on using different technologies such as blockchain at various aspects, where I guess we can discuss it at a later stage. And the third development we're looking at quite closely is machine learning and artificial intelligence. And these three are important. They're actually on that order of importance when it comes to impact on cost and also revenues for potential firms that do implement them. The difference I see between more sophisticated markets globally, meaning Asia, US, and Europe, versus markets that are emerging, such as in the Middle East and Africa, for instance, is that the scale and the speed of adoption is probably different. But I do recognize that there is a definite inclusion in the innovative roadmap of each client I have personally that is defining their roadmap for innovation. A lot of them are embracing the idea of cloud deployment, but that is a question of regulation, whether the sovereignty would allow data to leave the country or not. There are models around that. There is a private cloud, there is the hosted cloud, there is of course the public cloud, which we need to mention is extremely securitized from the perspective of the cloud vendors. That's their bread and butter. They make sure that it's perfectly encrypted and sealed. There is, of course, a lot of adoptions that we can see of blockchain across the region. So you have regulators in internationally regulated markets, places within the UAE, for instance, say DGM or the IFC, that have regulatory labs that foster prototypes built on local sandboxes to build specific use cases without major regulation. But the idea behind that, which is great, is that it allows them to grow a minimum viable product to be potentially put live, but at the same time, in parallel, have the regulation that could govern that on a gradual basis. So to briefly answer your question, it's different levels of adoptions, but it's definitely high on priority. I see it in the region here.
Interesting. I think we can come back on the pace of adoption here. I would like to hear before that from Henry. How is the experience of the Abu Dhabi's Securities Exchange with adopting such models recently? If you could just share with us how things are being done there, and what do you believe are the biggest challenges for the exchange in Abu Dhabi at this moment?
Yes, thank you. First of all, when I listened to the morning session, And there was a lot of discussion on liquidity and transparency and disclosure and corporate governance. Technology doesn't solve the problem of liquidity, so we need to be clear on that. Technology is not the one that creates liquidity in the market. When we look at the new technologies such as blockchain, AI, robotics, some of them are more mature technologies than the others. Blockchain is not mature technology yet. Actually, not all people know that there are 10 different blockchain technologies out there. There's not only one, there's multiple. And not single of them have been actually been mature enough to be really used in the core technologies of the financial market. Not at least successfully. What we are looking at ADX is to experiment, do some incubation of those, and if there is something that we can use the technology to support a business process or a service that would create benefits to the market, those are the ones that we look into and try to solve the problem. So we are looking at the pain points of the services or businesses. We are not taking blockchain and try to figure out what to do with it. So the first thing, which is really very good use case that we started last year, was the first year of in production, is the e-voting solution that is based on blockchain technology. So this is the second consecutive year we are using it, and we have good understanding how the system works. What are the challenges to adopt the blockchain-based e-voting system, which is not obvious. So you can have all kinds of fancy services, but if the adoption, if the users of that technology are not either willing, or they are afraid of the technology or something else, then we have failed. So we want to understand what are the pain points in the business to introduce a technology. So the next thing is that we have identified one very, very difficult business process, which we call late confirmation of the trade. And that's a perfect use case to, again, experiment multiple new technologies, actually. We are going to see whether blockchain makes sense. At the same time, when late confirmation actually includes multiple players across the border, and multiple players, including investors, global custodians, local custodians, the exchange, the broker, etc. That's a perfect case coupled or coupled with robotics, for example, or even artificial intelligence. So that's what we look next. And then we have a sort of pipeline of other types of pain points of the industry where we see that the new technology might make sense. But it's experimentation, incubation, potentially going into production, because the technology is still rather immature. There's no standards. There are no standard practices or regulations to use it. So we need to go slowly and try to understand the benefits of the technology.
Stephen, you as a consultant for the Securities and Commodities Authority here in the UAE, how do you see the position and the dialogue with the regulators and the industry here in the region? How is this happening at the moment, and where do you see it leading to?
Well, I think the development has to go, as we heard earlier as well, into harmonizing a regulation enabling the markets. That way technology plays a separate role there. And as a side note to what Henry just said, we mustn't forget that the systems, they simply evolve over time. They don't come just because we have blockchain now or cryptocurrencies are here. Everything happens quickly, and the same is true for the regulation. We'll have to actually see and assess how these technologies will be implemented, and if they actually change the way on how the market participants do business. And then if we would have to change the regulation, introduce new regulation, or whether these developments can be shoehorned in existing regulations. And if you look around the globe on how regulators react, I mean, a lot of them, when it comes to these modern technologies, they simply hit the brakes, wouldn't allow this or wouldn't allow that. Look at SEC and how they treated, they said ICOs, if they look like an IPO, you have to apply with this regulation. And I think this is where we'll actually get into. We'll carefully assess what they do to our markets. We are developing interpretations of our laws for cryptocurrencies and the assets that are coming along with that, crypto assets coming along with that. As Henry just stated, 10 different blockchains. Smart contracts involve all sorts of different issues that come along with them. We really have to look carefully into what they're doing to the markets. But again, implementation is not immediate. It is gradual. And as I just heard on the other day, on the payment side, for example, an organization like Citigroup has 2,000 different programs just doing payment transactions. Now, just because there is a cryptocurrency methodology, a DLT coming along, they're not blasting out 2,000 different programs. That is a long process, a drawn-out process to actually implement that.
Just a final question from my side, and then we'll just open to the audience. I would like to ask Faisal and Bashar, what are the concerns regarding security in all of the new frameworks that we have regarding blockchain, regarding all of the products that you and your companies offer to your clients? What are the biggest concerns, and how can you try to tackle them and try to explain them to your clients here in the region?
You mean cybersecurity?
Yes, cybersecurity.
So I think this is a very interesting point. Going back to the two comments I've just heard on the maturity of the technology, it is true. We are in 1992 when it comes to blockchain. We are, if I compare blockchain to the internet, we are really at the early days. We're back in 1992. But the rate of adoption is going to be much faster. And blockchain will do to transactions what the internet did to information. And think about it a little bit, because that is an opportunity to rewrite and redefine all of our processes around that. One example that we're using in IBM, for example, we're doing our own medicine. We're using smart contracts for dispute resolutions. Normally we have something like $100 million blocked for 4 months because we have 4,000 suppliers with whom we have some open dispute. With putting these smart contracts on the system, we reduced that to 12 days. And you can imagine we had a lot of ideas of what to do with $100 million that were locked for 4 months. Going back to the question of cybersecurity, 80% of crimes 10 years from now will be cyber crimes. And that also, again, gives us an opportunity to think, how is our security provision going to look like? What is the role of the police? How are we going to define counter security measures? How are we going to act around that? We're going to fundamentally revisit everything around cybersecurity, whether it's in banking, in finance, in government, in everything around that. And we will have to use new technologies like artificial intelligence, because you have to be 5 steps ahead of the hackers, like blockchain, because you need to have a single, secure, immutable register when you do KYC, for example. we are at an inflection point, as I said, and we are at a very exciting time where a lot of these technologies are going to come together, and we're going to rewrite the world we live in almost from scratch, because we have an interconnected environment with a lot of data and capability around it.
Faisal, would be good to hear your view as well.
Sure. No, it's interesting to hear Bashar's statistics on cybercrime, and also reading on the Gartner Group's publications that they anticipate about $93 billion to be spent on cybersecurity for 2018, and I think it was about $90 billion last year, actual spend. But wherever you talk about innovation or technological innovations, you talk about cybersecurity and crime. Obviously, they go hand in hand. From our perspective as NASDAQ, again, we are operators of markets. We must make sure that our systems are secure, so we are very cautious when it comes to our measures on cybersecurity, but also making sure that our systems are protected, that are sold externally to clients. But I think cybersecurity applies to blockchain at the same degree that it can apply to any other technology. So blockchain is no different. It's the same in different format or different body, so to say. So it is of utmost importance to NASDAQ. There are a lot of measures that we're taking in order to make sure that we have the right cybersecurity measures within our organization, most of which is that when you have charters that are agreed at board level of NASDAQ, and that charter is then, or program is funneled through the whole organization. So each person within NASDAQ is accountable for taking certifications on a yearly basis to make sure that we comply with the different various aspects of cybersecurity. And that training keeps improving on a yearly basis. And we also partner, obviously, with InfoSec companies that have at least technologies that try to cope up with cyber criminals, because obviously they outsmart honest businesses and even technologists like us and researchers. So yeah, that's our view.
Firstly, before I get to my speech, I'd just like to say thank you so much for the invitation and for the chance to come here and speak to all of you. We've had a very warm welcome at Citi. We've been obviously in the region for a number of years, worked with a number of market participants, a number of clients in the region for many years, and having been from the region myself, it's an incredible pleasure for me to be back here. I do want to talk a little bit about, I think this prior panel really spelt out some of the challenges that we have, some of the challenges that we have at Citi, some of the opportunities that we have at Citi. And the prior panel really spelt out and teased out, I thought, some of the issues that are pertinent for the industry, financial securities industry in general. Firstly, just to introduce myself personally, I run Citi's direct custody and clearing business. It's Citi's preeminent business that effectively provides custody solutions, sub-custody solutions to global custodians, broker-dealers, wealth managers, aggregators around the world. We manage about $5 trillion in AUC and are pretty much the biggest sub-custodian in the world, with proprietary presence in about 62 markets around the world. We also cover about 97 to 98% of the global equity market capitalization, which basically positions us as the preeminent provider of this service. I do want to spend a couple of minutes talking about EM and talking about the trends we see in the EM. Having spent most of my professional career in the EM, I've been at Citi for about 26, 27 years, and having spent about 20 years in the EM, I do want to talk a little bit about trends. While EM has generally, and markets around the world have generally been regarded as drivers of rapid growth and attractive returns, these numbers of trends have been balanced in recent history, and with growth slowing down, interspersed with unpredictability. I would, however, spend a couple of minutes and say that investors haven't really given up on the EM. I think this is just par for the course, and returns for the EM do tend to be sporadic and do tend to come back over time. having said that, what is the role that we at Citi play? We basically play the role of helping foreign investment come into each market. And what we think that each of the emerging markets' desire to attract foreign investment and capital will form the sustained basis for growth in the future. The orientation and directionality of reforms is pretty much the same in each market, seeking to attract foreign investment. Achieving emerging market status across most of the region, led by Egypt, the UAE, and Qatar, and most recently the ongoing recognition and expectations for Saudi and Kuwait, are all contributing factors to foreign investors' interest in the region, not just in the region itself, but generally emerging markets as well. The region's openness to development, working towards best practices, and now having the chance to even set best practices should set the region on a sustained path which fosters capital growth in the region. So, in short, we think that there's a lot of interest in the region, a lot of developments in the region, which should allow a lot of foreign investments and interest to come through. Now, what's the role that Citi, as the biggest global custodian, can play in this local market space? We think about three things in particular. The first and foremost is thought leadership. Firstly, as the preeminent sub-custodian, Citi is at the forefront of regulatory and financial market infrastructure connectivity in the major markets around the world. As an enabler of foreign investment, Citi is active in each market that we are present in to engage regulators, market players, and infrastructure owners to pursue policies and guidelines which foster transparency, consistency, and partnership. The second thing that we focus on, which the prior panel kind of touched on and spent a lot of time, is innovation. Before I get into innovation and talk about innovation, I think there was a question in the prior panel which talked about innovation and security, and what are the regulators doing about innovation, and do they foster innovation? And the first thing that I would like to say is, as the biggest sub-custodian in the world, one of the key things that drives our decision-making is the ability for our clients and their investors is to sleep well at night. So as we think about innovation, we think about that with the overarching thought of asset security and the fact that our clients ask us to custody these assets for the benefit of their investors. So thinking about innovation from that lens, we do think development of new technologies is going to effectively drive the way forward for the industry. First and foremost, fintech. Blockchain technology, or in general, distributed ledger technology, along with other high tech, is probably even more feasible in the EM, giving the relative earlier stage of market connectivity and related developments. At this point of time, Citi is actively engaged in investing in distributed ledger technology around the markets, where we're trying to figure out an operating model with distributed ledger technology to see how we could potentially disrupt while still playing a role, not just as an investor, but also as a market participant. So there's more that's going to happen on that particular front. We see examples of that around the world. I think we're going to see some use cases come to market in the coming 12 to 24 months, which I'm sure we're going to be talking about in the very near future. Robotics and AI should further multiply the industry's product capabilities. Recently, here in the UAE, Citi implemented a robotic solution that allowed us to automate trade pre-matching, matching, and settlement process, not just in the UAE, but also including Kuwait. This not only saves money for us, but frankly improves cutoff times. It sends trade updates much earlier, and clients have a longer window to check each of their trades. What does that do? That effectively increases client times to review their trades and allow for clients to make sure there are less corrections and less fails as part of the process. So while we talk a lot about innovation, I think there's a lot of innovation that can be done as part of the processes that exist today to allow for the processes and clients to have a better experience. Another example of Citi's commitment to innovation is the launch and development of Proximity. It's a service that hopefully we think you're going to hear about much more in the future. We think it's going to be a major industry disruptor. It's actually been developed by two of the smartest brains that we have in-house within Citi, which effectively takes out and hopefully takes out a significant player in the space and allows us to make the process much more efficient. It effectively should re-engineer the entire proxy voting industry. It'll benefit the investors, given what happens today and the very, very bureaucratic and paper-based system that's applicable today. This proximity service is currently launching in the UK, and it's planned to roll out to other markets right after that. The last thing that I do want to talk a little bit about is security. As we think about security and innovation together. Cyber risk is a risk that we at Citi take very, very seriously. And as the industry moves towards cloud-based infrastructure, there continues to be questions from regulators, clients, and intermediaries on prevention, detection, and recovery from cyber attack. Supported by Citi's 24/7 fusion centers around the world, Citi's Information Protection Directorate takes a proactive stance against cyber issues through an intelligence-led and a threat-focused model. We have fusion centers around the world across a couple of continents, one in Asia, one in the US, which effectively covers all our systems and all our processes 24/7 and allows us to effectively look at all our businesses and all of the protocols within our businesses, given the fact that we're a global player and we enable trillions of dollars of transactions over the course of a year. We do get hit with some cyber activity, which we effectively manage through this process of our fusion infrastructure. So in summary, let me just say that Citi remains fully committed, not just to the region, but generically to innovation within the industry and working with regulators and the participants within the industry to continue to push the agenda for and grow the industry. I should mention that our CEO, Mike Corbat, was also here last week and has been in the region frequently and over the last several years. He just visited Saudi Arabia recently and officially launched Citi's return to the kingdom. In the securities services business, Citi remains deeply committed to the breadth of our model, and with the 62 proprietary markets and the 5 markets in the Middle East, we are also continuing to explore ways to expand our footprint, not just in the region, but globally as well. Lastly, I would say we're at an exciting time in the industry. While a lot of folks in the prior panel talks about threats, I do believe that with all the innovation comes a significant amount of opportunity and for the ability for all the players within the space to continue to drive the industry forward. So on that note, I'll finish. Thank you so much once again for inviting me. I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has them.
There's a lot of points that I think the stage where we are today in our markets differ from market to market in the region. So, for example, we have markets like Saudi Arabia, which is just going to open up now for internationals. They are going to be included, hopefully, in the FTSE and MSCI. While, for example, the UAE did this in 2016, although they opened the market in 2006. Some other markets tried this even before UAE, but what we notice is that a lot of that foreign institution that was the promise of them first coming in, we did not see that carry forward for all that period of time. What I'd like to address and understand is today, for example, a market, I don't know if you want to start with Oman, Muhammad, to tell us, you try to, as Mr. Ahmed Al-Marhoun said, that you always open for companies who are going to be listed, they have to be open completely to foreigners, one of the requirements, or they have a foreign part of it, yes? So why don't you see that how much is the foreign institution of that market, and why don't we see now we have traded, why don't we see that client or that traded value growing in the market over the years?
First of all investors looking for opportunities. Whenever there is opportunity, you'll find the investors heading towards that market. In Oman, we had like a strategy a long time ago since the inception of Muscat securities market. Our market is open for local and foreign investors. There is no restriction for the time being for foreigners to come and invest direct in the market. And again, as a regulator, we make sure like all the process and the procedure to allow the foreign investors to come and open an account and trade in the market to be very simple, straightforward, without any further complications. For example, some other jurisdiction, if you would like as a foreign investor to come and open an account to trade in exchange, you have to go through a very lengthy process, and you have to provide a lot of documents, should be like authenticated by, a lot of notary and a lot of things, which sometimes it put a barrier. But as I mentioned at the beginning, if the investors, they feel like there is a great opportunity in that market, he will take all that hassles to go towards all this kind of documentation and the process. Our market, maybe among the GCC, has the highest direct ownership in comparison to the capital market cap. It's representative on almost 30% of the total market cap owning by foreign investors. When we talk about foreign investors, that's excluding like the GCC and the Omanis. Again, there is no restriction. If there is any restriction, it's going to be on the company article of association by itself. But by the law, all the investors, they can come and invest directly, and they can hold up to 70% of the capital market cap of any public listed companies. Of course, there is some sort of steps and measure as the regulators. We took it just to control, the concentration on ownership of a company, not just for a foreigner, even for locals, which we tried to make it like very easy, simple, and again, transparent. From the transparent perspective, we try again, to come up with a new approach, which is like takeover approach. Takeover try to make it like more transparent to allow the investors locally or internationally to come and acquire a company if that's required, any process to be publicly disclosed to the.
But Mohammed, my question as a regulator, do you get the foreign institutions who want to come? Do you talk to them and do they tell you what are the barriers and what are the problems? For example, why aren't they, or what could you do more to get more of them? Is that something?
Actually, we open a dialogue with all the potential and local investors all the time. Especially there is a lot of representative of the foreign institution coming between time to Oman to do some sort of due diligence. And we've been very transparent and we listen to their obstacles if there is any obstacles, and we try to do our best to sort it out. As a regulator, we are enablers to the development of the market. We should not be like a hindering or a blocking stones there. Our main objective to make the life of everyone simple, straightforward, and again.
Are you succeeding?
Sorry?
Are you succeeding?
To some extent, yes. Among at least the regulatory authority within the Sultanate, thanks to God, we've been known like we are more like approachable and we are like open-minded. And we never say like this is a law, it's a Bible, you cannot change it. The law is being put there to meet a certain objective. If that law or that regulation, it could not like achieve objective which we're trying to achieve, we'll be able to do it and amend it immediately.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Fadi, I think Mohammed has touched on a point that you like very much about the, but I think there are more barriers of entry pre-trade rather than actually post-trade. But because you have the relationship as Arqam, I would say you specialize in trading for institutions and foreign institutions. Where do you think today that the regional markets have missed, or they're missing the point, or where could they do more to increase? Because we see the flow, although we see it peaking up at some times, but we also see it. For example, in the UAE, I'm sure you follow up this. I looked at the latest statistics. The foreign institutions have been net sellers in Dubai and net buyers in Abu Dhabi, for example. What can dictate some of those things, and in the region, please?
Sure. The strategy of the foreign investors in the region is still positive, and we are on a daily basis, talking to them, feed them with market information. The problem is not only the situation of the region. We know that the foreign investors are sensitive to this situation, but we are facing some problem of accessibility to the market. I can take a few samples. The international investors are used in their market to have a simple KYC process. When an investor is regulated by a major US or European regulator, he can trade in all the developed countries. He doesn't need to go country per country to set up new accounts and with a new set of documentation which should be approved, notarized, consurized by embassies and the ministries of foreign affairs. So this situation in the region is a little bit upsetting some of the investors, think, why I have to go through all this? I already did it in one market. If I'm regulated in Saudi market, why I'm not regulated automatically in the UAE market, for example, or vice versa? So we need also to look into this and to see how we can, with the help of the United Arab Securities Authorities, how we can make everyone work together and the regulators sitting together and said, okay, let's simplify the accessibility for the international investor to this region. Countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE are very close in many fields. Why not in the regulations, the market stock exchange regulations? So this is one thing. And the second thing, I think we have already raised it, it's the foreign ownership limits. This is also something that we have to work on it. But just to be clear, what have been done in the UAE market and in the Saudi market was amazing in the last few years in order to open more the markets and to attract more international investors. But we need to continue working in this direction.
Eric, as a regulator for markets here, especially in, I know you've done the like derivatives and the other parts. Although they have been introduced in the market, and at one point they were successful, we saw some high volumes, but then we see that has receded. We had some like market makers, like Susquehanna participants who were there for a while and then they left. Why do you don't think that, why aren't we seeing the derivative market blossom in the region on a regulatory, on an exchange, rather than on an OTC? Because I know on OTC institutions, they do a lot of that there. Why aren't we seeing those kind of volumes are being reflected in our exchanges? Is there something that we're not doing right, or is it just their demands are too high?
Well, or is it something that regulators are not doing right? But I'll get to that in a second. So I think there's a lot of different elements in that question. You know, for derivatives specifically, there's a few building blocks, if you like, that need to be in place. Legal certainty about the contract. What happens if my counterparty doesn't pay? Is my jurisdiction acceptable to the ISDA, the International Swap Dealers Association? Yep. Master agreement, and so on and so forth. So there's a couple of building blocks within different jurisdictions that may not work as well. So that's a starting point. And as a previous market participant and a derivatives market maker, the most important element as well was, is there an existing flow? So are firms, are brokers already trading and servicing their clients in the OTC space?
Yes.
I mean, that is a very good starting point, rather than saying, well, in my market this doesn't exist, and I want to increase the offering and make more products available. So start from scratch or capture existing flow onto a centralized platform like Nasdaq Dubai, the DME, DDCX, and there's one or two other examples. But the building blocks need to be there, the transactional flow need to be
Yes.
there, and then both on the broker and the client side, as well as on the regulatory side, authorities need to be educated what this means. In terms of client suitability, this is not for everybody.
But when you list it on exchange like the Nasdaq today, it is made for the retail today. It's not the institutions who are using it, right?
Well, I mean, institutions trade index contracts more than they might trade individual names. So they'd like to hedge their exposure to a whole portfolio for their clients. Perhaps then they would like to take an outright position. That's not my role as a regulator. My role as a regulator is to say, well, are clients aware of the risk that each instruments pose? But equally, are they aware and made aware of the benefits that it could have on their portfolio and performance? To give you an idea, I mean, there's many elements and there's many markets in the region, equity markets, that still, you know, are very reluctant to introduce short selling. Some have, others are looking at it. You know, a future contract, and I'm not propagating the use of future derivatives contract per se, but it does offer a different flavor. It does offer the ability for investors to take another view. The more views in the market, the more efficient markets become. And in my view, and that's two points that I've made, if we open up and we embrace those sort of change under certain regulatory controls, then the pie will be bigger, not necessarily the same size.
Okay. Rani, I'll leave you till the end because we'll talk about the developed markets if you allow me. Mohammed, as Euroclear and your activity in the region here, your clients are the international institutions. They mostly are the international institutions as a custodian. That volume has increased significantly, let's say, in the last, 5 to 10 years. You hear their pains, and sometimes you are the voice that you go to the regulators to try to ask for a few things. Regulators in the region, at least I know from the UAE, maybe some Oman now just heard, and they've done what they think they could in order to facilitate the requirements. Mm-hmm. What is there still missing, if there, for them to say that we have a developed market kind of standards of doing custody and requirements for international institutions?
Mm-hmm. Well, from Euroclear's perspective, our main goal is to facilitate easy access to different markets. And really the target of our assistance to different regulators or local markets is to make sure that their requirements are met within the framework of how Euroclear will connect to those markets. In the Middle East, we see quite a lot of innovations and changes happening over the last couple of years. We are quite welcomed by different parties in the different countries, in Oman, in the UAE, and in Saudi. And the main hurdles that we see coming up time and again can be some markets having restrictions on foreign investments, some markets not having restrictions on foreign investments, but having specific account structures that make them less attractive to foreign investors. If you look at the client base of Euroclear, we have around 2,000 international and domestic financial institutions. It covers the global custodians. It covers over 100 central banks and supranationals, broker-dealers from across the world, and domestic banks in various markets. And really, it's the combination of all these kinds of institutions that shows the long-term investor type of institution in Euroclear. And these kind of entities that are entering foreign markets tend to want to have simple access. Sometimes it makes it easier.
What is simple?
A simple access would mean an access that does not require a considerable amount of paperwork. Sometimes from a security or safety perspective, they want to see an international link coming into the market. If an institution needs to open a local account with a local bank in order to enter a market as a foreign investor, that may be a barrier because that institution would need to become an expert on the local regulatory environment, the local legal framework around that kind of account, and that could be a barrier for some institutions. What Euroclear tries to advocate is to open up the market to foreign investors by introducing international standards. The main standard, basically the main modus operandi of Euroclear is to have an omnibus account structure and a recognition of the nominee's account holder in the law of that country in order for Euroclear to be able to access that market. And
are there any markets in the region that have this omnibus or in the MENA?
There are partial setups in some of the markets here in the region. In Lebanon, it is a recognized setup. In the UAE, in the DFSA, there is also a recognition of the omnibus structure for foreign investors.
Okay.
And we work alongside the different regulators and the different lawmakers to show the benefits of the omnibus structure. I know the local markets tend to shy away from it because it appears that it hinders transparency and hinders the end investor. But in reality, there are countless markets across the world that have an omnibus structure that still provides a certain degree of transparency. For example, there are, if you look at the market in Thailand, they have a requirement of a final beneficial owner disclosure at the end of every month for the foreign holdings. Malaysia has taken a step further just recently and require registration of an LEI, it's the legal entity identifier, directly in the instruction of settlement, which would allow them to build, it builds a map of how the flows are going between different...
well, omnibus is more transparent than nominee, and we see nominee, but we don't see omnibus in some accounts, so I think I agree. We raised this, I think, in previous discussions. You know, the markets now, they talk about emerging markets. UAE has become an emerging market. Qatar has become part of the emerging market index. Saudi now is the next one on the... And although Saudi is going to get into the emerging market index, that's something happening everybody's looking at. UAE, they started to look at their target is to become part of the developed market. I think there was a 5-year plan that was set. Dr. Abeid is not here to tell us. And part of that developed market is they talk about CCP. We hear the CCP about being a CCP, having CCPs and as intermediaries. Terane, you're Snowbar, you specialize in providing technology for such things. You had exposure in implementing some of those systems. As I was discussing outside, CCP is not just one party. CCP is a kind of a system of participants. Can you just give us some background on some kind of successful implementations, please?
Yes, so we have been in the business of providing system to CCPs for a long time, and we have seen the CCPs evolve during these past years, especially after the financial crisis. And if we go back to why CCPs performed well, is that one of the reasons that we lost so much liquidity in the financial crisis was because the lack of transparency on the big bilateral positions that were going on, and also insufficient collateral management. And CCPs bring benefits to the markets, economic benefits, and also risk-reducing benefits to the markets. And one of the main benefits is the netting purpose of the CCPs. They do multilateral nettings between the exposures of the different participants. And who are these participants in the CCP? CCP is existing of their members, which they can be of different types of members. You have general clearing members that can clear for themselves and also be a clearing member for other brokers. You have the direct clearing members that can clear for themselves, and you also have the non-direct clearing member that are the brokers and need a GCM to clear their trades. So you have the CCP existing of its members, and the benefits of the CCP would be to reduce the counterparty risk that is in the market. So all of these members now trading will have CCP as their counterpart instead of the other participant. And that will reduce the credit risk, which is one of the key risk factors in financial transactions. And also you net the exposures in the trading. So if I'm a participant and I am selling and buying, and I have to pay and I have to receive money, all of these transactions cost, and an important role of CCP is to net these transactions. So at the end of the day, I will only need to have to pay or receive the money. That will increase the liquidity in the market. That will increase the liquidity for the participants to move into the more trading, and also reduce the liquidity risk at the case of a default, which is the third important role of a CCP, to manage the default of a clearing members going bankrupt. So these are the three main aspects of the benefits of a CCP, which is a very important part of derivatives market, if you're talking to bring in the derivatives market to the region.
Yeah, but there are also negatives, right? It's not always positive.
No, because the derivatives markets, it has increased at least by 10% in the past 12 years. And a good cash market will give opportunities for the derivatives market. The most traded derivatives out there is the stock options and stock futures, or index options and index futures. So in the region, we see a lot of strong cash markets. So the next step would be to utilize these strengths and bring in the derivatives. And for that, a CCP needs to be in place.
We're talking about building the capacity in the Arab financial markets. We will tackle 3 issues. First, from legal perspective, and second, from the capacity, and third, from infrastructure perspective. On the legal perspective, any market needs to have the needed regulations to regulate products, services, and market mechanisms. One of the issues in the Arab markets that the products are limited. Usually it's only limited to stocks and bonds, sometimes sukuk, and on occasions some derivatives like warrants or rights issues. Second thing, on the capacity, the Arab markets have been around for about, especially for instance the UAE, about 18 years. Although we've gone a long way in the past 18 years, we did what other probably markets did in 50 years, but there's a lot to learn. We need our esteemed panelists to talk about knowledge, awareness, and certification. The final one is about the infrastructure. The infrastructure in our markets is usually vertical, where all the functions, trade and post-trade, are done under one roof. And as per the IOSCO principles, markets should not bear any risk, especially in the clearing area. Maybe we need to move to a more horizontal market. The other thing is that the UAE has been successful in the past 2-3 years implementing the SRO model, where most of the operational decisions and rulemaking was transferred to the markets, and in the future CCPs and probably another body like FINRA-like. The first question I'd like to ask to, of course, the panelists will introduce themselves when answering questions the first time, and when asked somebody the question, others are free to jump in and see what value they would like to add. Dr. Mohan, would you talk to us about corporate governance in the listed companies in the UAE and their role in attracting trading and liquidity? The other thing is, are our companies covered enough in research, both internally and internationally?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Barakat. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me introduce myself. My name is Mohan, Dr. Mohan, a fellow of Cambridge University, Judge Business School. Earlier, I was advisor of strategy to Executive Council of Abu Dhabi, part of the 2030 planning. Currently, I play a role as an academician in the Australian University of Wollongong, heading the Executive MBA and teaching strategy as well as corporate governance. While my fellow distinguished panelists will be focusing on a number of key core issues, I would like to talk about 3 specific things: capacity building, research, and governance mechanism. Now, when it comes to capacity building, with a view to widen and deepen the market, it's very important and critical that capacity and capability are built amongst all the stakeholders and not specific entities. Capacity building is a dynamic process. It's a continuous process. As markets evolve, regulatory framework evolve, capability development should go hand in hand with them. When it comes to research, personally, as a professor of corporate governance, I feel our region is grossly under-researched. There's a huge scope. We have a researcher in our panel who will later on add some points to this. Huge amount of data available in the capital market.
data crunching, big data analytics, developing correlations. In general, global investors want a 360-degree vision of the market. And this could come up only with a lot of in-depth research. The third point of governance, let me share with you specifically the role of boards in all these players. The boards have two specific roles, performance and conformance. Performance involves strategy and policy formulation. Conformance involves supervising the management team and accountability. To share with you a very interesting piece of research, board of directors in the West were asked, out of the 4, where you should ideally spend more time. They said we should spend time in strategy and policy formulation 2/3 of our time. But in reality, when it was found through research that it is the opposite. People tend to spend at the board much more time in supervising and delegate the authority of strategy and policy making down the line. So I think this is another area which needs attention. Thank you, Doctor.
Ustaz Ahmed, if you want to add to that on the corporate governance side of the story, please.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My name is Ahmed Al-Jared. Good afternoon, everyone. I work as the authorization manager in the Capital Market Authority, responsible for receiving, reviewing, and making recommendations to the Board of Commissioners of the CMA for licensing securities business companies, as well as registration of employees working in the securities business companies. We call them authorized persons. In the corporate governance issue, the CMA issued a long time ago, about in 2012, its instructions for all authorized persons to comply with the corporate governance criteria, one of which is having independent board members of at least two members or a third of the board of directors. The other point that we added in the instructions is the segregation between the CEO and the chairman. And the chairman should not be holding any position in the or any executive role in the parent company. We closely monitor the compliance of corporate governance of all OIPs. We ask them for disclosures that they have to do every quarters, as well as their annual reports, and also publish certain information in their website. That's in the corporate governance issue. We also in the authorization department manage and develop the qualifications exams for employees who are carrying out registrable functions. And the CMA has launched a series of exams that are mandatory for individuals who are working on certain functions. And currently we are revamping our the exam where we will introduce by end of this year hopefully a new set of exams that encompass different business areas in the securities business, such as asset management, corporate finance activities. That's in a nutshell what we do in the authorization department.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Anita, if you would like to add a few words on research.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anita.
Anita Yadav. I'm head of research at Emirates NBD. Before this, I was managing director, head of global markets at Nomura. In regards to when we talk about building the capacity, of course, research is one pillar there. But the key thing that I find, all this morning we've heard quite a bit about regulations, about the underlying infrastructure, about the IT and the new products. The one thing that I want to add is, this is a castle, the capital market castle is something that needs to be built up with several fundamental pillars going up at the same time. One pillar that we probably haven't talked as much about right now is the issuer. Where is the issuer that needs to issue equity or the issuer that needs to raise debt? The Arab markets right now is very, very much public sector driven. Governments are the one that owns most of the large companies that provide activity, the utilities, the toll roads, the airports, the oil and gas companies, everything seems to be government owned. And when everything is government owned and government has huge deep pockets, there is no real issuer there. We can create all the infrastructure in the world and have all the regulation in the world, but if there is no issuer, how are we going to take this market further? I think the fundamental thing that we need to start with is the markets here need to start getting privatized. It needs to become more private sector driven. The government needs to privatize assets. When there is a varied issuer base is how the market will then obviously be able to use all these other things that we are talking about, the infrastructure and the regulations, and invite the investors and all those things. So to me, that is the critical point. Now, talking about research, yes, the purpose of the financial market, most participants who come in the market want a return, right? When you want a return on your investment is where an idea, an executable idea, a profitable idea is what research provides. It gives you an information to make more informed decisions. Why the research in this part of the world is not huge? Again, it comes down to the same point, that most of the market is dominated by sovereigns and sovereign-owned entities. It's a very sensitive sector to talk about in independent terms. You cannot analyze a government-owned entity is a lot more complex because there is a support behind it. How do you factor that in? You can't just look at the underlying economy and the numbers. The analysis becomes a lot more complex. Transparency becomes a little less versus if it was a private listed entity which needs to offer accounts every quarter or every 6 months, right? And I guess it's that dominance by the sovereign and governments that make research challenging. That's probably why you would notice that the bulk of the research on GCC is basically, there are very few houses who have research people on the ground. There are some houses that have research forces in London and Hong Kong and all, but they all struggle again to come up with credible ideas and information because there is lack of information and the transparency. I'll leave it at that for the time being. Yeah.
Great. That takes us to the next point, is that part of developing a market is to have more products. Nitish, if you want to tell us about what is needed for our markets to build their capacity in terms of issuance of bonds and sukuk. One thing noted, everybody knows about this, that most issuers prefer to issue outside the country, prefer to list outside the country. Why aren't they issuing inside the country? What's needed for them to issue and list inside the country in terms of legal infrastructure and capacity?
Thank you, Doctor. My name is Nitish Bhojnagarwala. I work for Moody's Investor Service. I've been with Moody's for a little more than 7 years, and I cover banks across the GCC. But during the 7 years, I've also covered banks in countries like South Africa, Mauritius, and more recently, along with GCC, I covered Turkey. And I also cover for Moody's Islamic finance. I think partly Anita stole my thunder in terms of talking about the issues, which is clearly a big gap in the development of financial market in these countries. But just to complement what she said, aside from this economy, which is very government and government-related entity focused. The other part is very family business-oriented focus. And we haven't seen a lot of family houses also trying to come up and either have a wider investor base through equity listing, or at the same time through debt issuances in various markets, which could be local or international. So I think one clear issue is the lack of issuers from the dominant pillars of the economy, which are government, government-related entities, and large family houses, which anecdotally sort of are probably more than 3/4 of the local economy, because small and medium enterprises are not a large part of broadly the GCC economies. I think one other aspect which is missing, which Dr. Barakat mentioned, is why issuers are going internationals and not issuing locally. I think part of our responsibility as Moody's, we also talk to investors who are investing in these countries. So I've also met a lot of sovereign wealth funds outside the GCC, pension funds, life insurance companies, and large asset management firms, which are spread all over the world, but unfortunately not in the GCC. And the local wealth also seems to be invested internationally rather than domestically. So what are the key questions or concerns these investors have for us over and above let's say an asset manager based in London would like to invest in a local company? And aside from a local or business model questions, the key questions that we get, which are a bit unique to the region, first is on the structure of the economy. International investors do have a lot of questions in trying to understand the structure of the economy, the competitiveness in terms of all the GCC governments have a diversification agenda. How far have they been able to push into that, along with reforms, which seems to be gathering a bit of momentum since the low oil prices in 2014. But international investors would like to know how these governments have been successfully able to push on the reform agenda, and whether it will continue now that oil prices have gone up. The second question, which Mr. Mohan also mentioned, is on the corporate governance, and also mentioned by the other fellow panelist. They do have a lot of questions, and they seek opinion on the corporate governance framework of the domestic institutions who are indeed investing internationally or borrowing internationally. Aside from that, the other questions that we get is on reporting quality. Indeed, some of the institutions that are borrowing internationally or listing or seeking investors internationally, they do have a lot of, let's say, benchmarks against Western or best practices, and they do find that there is a substantial gap between, let's say, the best practices versus the reporting standards in the local context or regional context. We do get questions also on geopolitical developments, but unfortunately that's something which is a bit wider in scope, but quite unique to the region. And lastly, the questions or concerns which international investors have is on the legal framework, that if they were to come and invest locally or on local institutions, how secured is their investment? What is the legal framework? What kind of protection does it offer to investors? One sort of case which has been discussed, and I do remember, Anita, we were in Saudi Arabia about the Dana Gas, one of the corporates in the UAE, restructuring its debt. And we do get a lot of questions around legal framework, enforceability of these investors in the domestic context. So I think to address your question and to cut the long story short, I think for domestic, let's say, investment or domestic financial markets, you need a bit of addressing all these questions over and above. I think regulators have created the platform. We've heard throughout the day there have been substantial changes, but I think we need to find ways to address these concerns so that some of these international investors can come and invest locally, and also on the domestic investment side.